Okay, welcome to the February 27th meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. May I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Morgan. Here. Commissioner Shire.
Here.
Commissioner Tafankian.
Here.
Commissioner Vartarnian.
Here.
And Chairperson Vidor.
Here. Next item is Commission Chair. Voting to determine who the next Commission Chair for 2012 will be, as well as Vice Chair.
That's right. Every year, and we're doing it in February this year because we canceled our meeting last month. But one of you lucky commissioners is going to be nominated by your peers to be chair of the commission for the next calendar year. So we run it through the end of the year. And what we do is just open it up for nominations from the group. And then we also will be electing a vice chair who obviously serves when the chair can't be at the meeting.
Do
we hear any nominations for a new chair?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Desiree Shar, who's the vice chairman now, to be chair for the HPC.
That seems appropriate.
I second that.
Roll call, Ida?
Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Shire.
Abstain.
Commissioner
No humility at the dais?
Yes.
Commissioner Vartarnian.
Yes.
And Chairperson Vidor.
Yes.
Almost unanimous. Okay, and now we can transfer seats, and then our new chair can take nominations for vice chair. And name cards in front of you.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Okay, are there nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Morgan as vice chair.
And I'll second that.
Hackett?
Okay,
And
roll
vote?
call.
Commissioner Morgan.
Abstain.
Commissioner Tafankian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vartarnian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
And Chairperson Shire.
Yes.
Okay, very good. This was a seamless coup, bloodless and easy transition.
Great.
So congratulations.
Yes.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay, so item number 3. The posting of the agenda for this meeting was taking place on Tuesday, on or before Tuesday, February 21st, on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. Our next item is approval of the minutes from the December 12th, 2011 meeting, which was a special meeting. Do I have any comments or corrections?
I just have one question
Okay.
on the topic of the Verdugo Adobe and the fact that it was continued. Is it appropriate, since we had specific issues we wanted them to follow up on, to identify those here, or is it identified anywhere?
Yeah, it's identified in the record of the hearing as well as in my notes that I'm working with the applicant on. When we do these action minutes, we often
I know,
don't
we keep
do
them
those
brief,
specific,
but
yeah.
I know there were only one or two things. Okay, as long as they're documented somewhere.
Any other comments? Do I have a move to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of December 21st,
I second.
or 12th, sorry.
Commissioner Morgan.
Yes.
Commissioner Tafankian.
Abstain.
Commissioner Vartarnian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor.
Yes.
Chairperson Shire.
Yes. Okay, now for oral communications, I have one card. Sean Bursell.
Thank you. I'm Sean Bursell. I'm with the Glendale Historical Society. And first off, let me congratulate the new chair and vice chair on your appointment. And we look forward to working with you in the coming year. I wanted to let you know that this coming Sunday, March the 4th, the Glendale Historical Society is having a workshop on window restoration at the Doctor's House in Brand Park. I'm sure you're aware that window restoration is a big issue for us. This workshop will show people how to maintain and restore their vintage wood and steel windows rather than replacing them. A lot of people are concerned about energy efficiency, of course, these days, and they think that they need to replace their beautiful wood windows or vintage steel windows with something newer, and that's not the case. You can restore these windows and maintain them, and rather than replace them. It maintains the unique character and architectural integrity of the home, and it also makes financial sense. So we're going to hold this workshop this coming Sunday, March the 4th, from noon to 3 p.m. As I said, it's at the Doctor's House, which is 1601 West Mountain, and we're going to be in the gazebo there, and we're going to have Ed Sanchez, who does window restoration and repair, and Alan Adams, who is a master carpenter, who has 25 years experience in this. And we did this workshop last year. I thought it was very, very interesting, because not only did they explain the benefits of maintaining and restoring your windows, but they really showed how to do repairs and the like. So we would encourage anybody who's listening, who's thinking about doing something to their windows, to come to the workshop and learn how to maintain and restore their vintage wood and steel windows. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item is comments from the commissioners.
I just wanted to mention that March 3rd is the last day that the Brand Library is going to be open to the public. And it is also the closing reception for the Purchasing Power. Jurors make their mark exploring the Associates of Brand Library juried exhibitions from 1971 to 1980. So that's going to be in the afternoon from 4 to 5. And it features 35 artworks from the Associates of Brand Library Purchase Award from the first 10 years of the program. So that would be worth going to.
Thank you.
I have an announcement, also related to the Associates of Brand Library, and this involves our esteemed colleague over there on the side. Caroline has curated, she is an art curator, and she has curated a beautiful exhibition at the Fine Arts Building, which is a historic landmark in
Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, in the beautiful lobby of the artwork of Arthur Sarkisian, who is kind of a correct me if I'm wrong, post-Soviet era abstract expressionist artist, working out of Armenia, and this is, I understand, a really exquisite exhibit in an incredibly exquisite and historic building. The event, which includes a tour of the art given by Carolyn, and then followed up by some discussion about the building's lobby, is on March 24th at 11 a.m. Those who attend would be meeting at the building. There will be a notice put out. This is a members' event for the Associates of Brand Library, but for a small donation, the public is certainly welcome to come. So once again, it is March 24th at 11 a.m. At the Fine Arts Building in downtown Los Angeles, 811 West 7th Street, and we will be sending out a notice to the general public as well as to our members. So we hope all our members come, and we certainly hope that everyone from the public can join us too, because it's quite an exquisite marriage of art and architecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. And I would just like to thank you as well for curating that. It sounds like a wonderful event and coming together of art and architecture. We love that. And I also wanted to thank the Glendale Historical Society for bringing forth this Windows event for a second year. I was unable to attend last year, but it's a very important topic, and I think last year there was one professional. This year there will be two. I know it was very well attended last year, and it sounds like the event is expanding, and I will definitely be there this Sunday. So, thank you.
I would just like to concur with, excuse me, my other commissioners on what Caroline is doing, Commissioner, and everything else that is going on. Thank you.
Lots of good stuff going on.
Okay, with that, let's go to old business. Do we have any?
We have no old business.
Okay. Then number 8, new business, review of certified local government annual report.
Okay, this is, Glendale is one of a number of cities around the state that's part of the Certified Local Government Program of the State Historic Preservation Office. It's actually a federal program mandated by the National Historic Preservation Act. And what it boils down to, what's important for us, is that it means that the state is looking at us on a yearly basis to make sure that we meet the requirements of what a sound body focusing on historic preservation does in a municipality. So they want to make sure that we have a commission made up of people who know what they're talking about. They want to make sure that we are designating buildings and have an ordinance that allows us to protect buildings that have been designated. And this is their way for all of their CLGs throughout the state to kind of pull in information and make sure we're doing okay. So far, so good. We haven't been busted for anything. But they do make recommendations, or they do ask questions about it. So the nice thing is they're not just receiving this every year and filing it away. They're actually looking at it and thinking about it. So it keeps us kind of focused. And I don't want to say it's fun for me to do, but it's enlightening to kind of look back over the year and remember what we've accomplished and kind of the goals that we have set for ourselves. Now, one thing that, since I've been here, I haven't done very well, and I'm not sure if any of my predecessors did with previous commissions, is kind of have this kind of dialogue. And I think for the coming year and years in the future, I think it's important for the commission to be involved in kind of setting goals and for us to kind of think about these things as a group, and then certainly for you guys to review the report each year. If you'll notice on the report itself, they have a funny calendar year at the State Parks and Recreation Department. So everything that we do focuses from October through September. So it's not a regular fiscal year, it's not a regular calendar year, it's the year we have to deal with. So when you look through it, there are things like we have 10 properties that were designated for this report, even though only 6 were designated in 2011. So we just have to keep that in mind. But what I could do is either walk through the report and talk about the different sections and where we might have more or less commission input as we do this, if you'd like.
I think that'd be helpful for the community, for sure.
Okay, because certainly some of this is boilerplate that we kind of just recycle from year to year, but then a lot of it gets tailored, obviously, to fit the accomplishments of the year. So when we look at preservation laws, at this point, this has been recycled for a number of years now, and we just want the SHPO to see that we have an ordinance, we have a historic preservation ordinance, we have a demolition review ordinance, and these are the kinds of things that keep us in good standing as far as certified local government goes. On page 2, we have a chart that shows the new landmark designations in the city. So like I said, we had 10 for this cycle with CLG, which is good. That's up toward the top of when I've been doing these reports. And what it means is that we have a community that's interested in preservation. We have a robust cycle of designations, and people are actually interested. When we talk about historic preservation element and plan on page 3, we're kind of in a transition regarding our existing preservation element because we've started, as you've heard already, we've started our community plan process. And ultimately, our community plans in aggregate, once we have the 4, what looks like we might be doing 4, possibly 5, will be replacing our preservation element with the combined group of historic contexts that we develop as part of the community plans. And it will be a much better document ultimately than the preservation element that we have, because it's going to guide kind of what we're looking for and how we kind of identify and designate properties in the future. So what I did for this year was tell them, the work wasn't done during the calendar year that they're looking for. So we're going to include that discussion in the next CLG report. But in the interim, I'm going to make sure that they review the context so that we can get their feedback, because we've just initiated the South Glendale Community Plan. So we want to make sure that the historic context we do for South Glendale meets what they're hoping to see in these documents. So I'm not going to wait till next January to give it to them. We'll give it to them soon and get some feedback on that. The section that starts on page 4, where we talk about design responsibilities, for the last number of years, that's been kind of boilerplate moving forward. How do we evaluate, make environmental assessments under CEQA for projects that come in? Who's responsible for that? So we kind of lay out that process and how preservation staff is involved in that, but we also have an environmental planner on staff who's very focused on CEQA documentation. So our team is very well equipped to deal with this. One of the things they also look for that I didn't include, it's an appendix that we add to this, is the resumes of not only our commissioners, but also the staff who are involved in preservation, so that if they want to get down to that level of detail, they can make sure that we're all kind of up on the fields that we're supposed to be working on. So that brings us to page 5, where we do list all of our seated commissioners as well as commissioners that were seated during the calendar year. So you can see that Vrej and Rubin still made it onto this list because of the calendar year they choose. And one thing that they do ask is there's a requirement that our commissioners meet the Secretary of the Interior's professional standards for either history, architectural history, can't remember, there's another one. And the commission, as it's seated today, only Desiree Shire meets the Secretary's standards as a practicing professional with a degree in the field. But all of you are bringing something so specific through your advocacy work or your understanding of history that we lay out in this document that, at this point, 4 out of 5 of you meet specific requirements that they're looking for. And then we also know that, everyone who's appointed to the commission has shown a tremendous interest in preservation in the community and knows the community. So they've never questioned whether we have enough kind of expertise and interest on our commission. But we are below, we're expected to have 2 people who meet the Secretary's standards, and right now we only have 1. This is something we don't have any control over because we're ultimately dependent on city council appointments. But I certainly think we have a fantastic commission, and I tried to convey that in this document, and hopefully we're going to not hear anything back about that, and they'll understand the situation. We keep track of your attendance, so there's a chart showing that you guys are present and available to fulfill your duties. And then we, on page 7, we also go through a chart that talks about the various trainings that we received during the year. This is something that was called out when they reviewed last year's report. They were disappointed in the level of commissioner participation in training sessions. So I'm going to take a more active role in kind of making sure you guys know what's out there. Hopefully, if you're members of the local and state preservation groups, you also are getting notification when they have trainings, but I'll do my best to kind of share a little more. To that end, on each of your tables, we have the California Preservation Foundation conference is coming up in May in Oakland. If all of you went to that, that would satisfy them for the entire year. I have a feeling you won't all make it, but if any of you make it, that looks good for us. It's good for you. It shows that you're, really interested in pursuing this field and kind of broadening your preservation horizons.
Jay, can I interject and ask a question? Since the Historic Society recently just announced today that they're having this event this coming Sunday on Window.
We will include such events on our chart.
If commissioners attend that, would that be included in the CLG report?
It's not like you get AIA credits or anything for this. We just kind of list what the events are that people are attending, so that would definitely count.
Okay.
That's cheaper and easier than going to Oakland. So, but I think they're looking for more than just kind of sporadic attendance. I think they want you guys to really be out there, and they expect the same thing of staff. So if you go to Oakland, I'll be there with you. So whether that's an enticement or not, you don't have to tell me. But this is something I try to keep track of as best I can through the year, and I reached out to you guys a few months ago to, refresh my memory. So feel free to, either at hearings or just calling me at the office, remind me when you've been to these events, and I'll keep track of it on a calendar so we know. On page 9, they ask about our surveys. Surveys are really important for SHPO and obviously for communities and for preservation in general. We didn't complete any surveys, so we have a note that we're in progress on surveys and survey updates that we expect most likely we'll be able to report those back in 2012. But they're definitely keeping track. And then page 10 is one of the interesting pages for them in terms of how much educational outreach we do. So I keep track of all the presentations that I do, and when you do presentations on behalf of the commission, it's important to let me know. Generally, I think we'll talk about it, but if something comes up, be sure to let me know so that we can include that here and make sure that they know that we're actually out in the community, spreading the word. And then we can skip a few pages that are designed for new CLGs. And starting on page 13, they ask us about our Mills Act program. As of this reporting period, we had 48 properties in the Mills Act. And then, like I said, we had designated 10 new Glendale Register properties. And then I think for them and for us, one of the most, if not the most important part of this starts on page 14, where we're kind of summing up. What are we doing? What's the status of preservation in our community? What kind of support do we have? What are some of the challenges we face? And then what kind of goals are we setting for ourselves? So, for example, in terms of goals, many of the goals that I put in the CLG report for last year, we didn't meet during this period. We're close to meeting some of them, and it's like, I honestly have to tell them, yeah, we didn't meet these, but, we're working on it, we're close, and we're doing our best. And so this is where I think, as we move forward each year through our meetings, as we talk about goals, we'll be able to include these. And I'm already realizing things like, I can't remember if I even included designation of city-owned properties in here. But if it's not here, that's definitely something we'll include next year. Or if we're already done with it by the time we do this next year, we'll report it as one of our successful efforts. So I can already see that's, this is one of the sections where I can really use the Commission's help because I tend to do this, not long before the deadline and, kind of pull it together. So the more information I have laid out throughout the year and can just plug into this, it's going to make life easier. So, and I think that's basically it. We have our new goals, and obviously we have others that aren't even listed here. We're not bound by any of this, obviously, and they understand when we can't make it. And then they ask us about trainings. We've hosted one CPF or one CLG training in Glendale before. We'd like them to come here again. We want to make ourselves a good place for them to choose to do trainings because that makes it easier for us to get our training. I put down a few ideas in terms of training subjects, but I think you are better than I am in kind of coming up with those ideas. So I threw out a training in criteria and findings for designation and a kind of a refresher on the Secretary standards for rehabilitation. And then most importantly, they're starting to move toward webinars instead of in-person trainings. And the more we can do that and reduce costs, and obviously they're cutting back pretty heavily in Sacramento also, I think we'll be able to be more successful if you guys can sit at home and actually go through these. And the trick is to make them interesting. So hopefully that'll happen. So that's the basic format of the CLG report that we do. And if you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear them.
Are there any comments from the Commission?
I have a quick question. On page 16, where you reference the CHRID database, I don't think I know what that is.
CRID is an existing database that we have that includes all of our designated properties as of today, all of our properties that are in historic districts. A couple of years ago, we recognized some limitations with CRID. It's a very cumbersome process. It's a database that was given to us by the state, and so we inherited this kind of format. And so we had an idea to kind of make it a little more user-friendly on the public's end, and also for us as we're entering data into it. And to be honest, we ran into lots of problems with the company, the consultant company that is doing this work, and we're still working with them. We think they're close to getting a solution, because what we did was we have an existing CRID, which has, I can't remember how many properties in it, several hundred certainly, and we've identified through going through all of our previous surveys almost 2,000 properties that have been surveyed. It doesn't mean they're historic. It doesn't mean they will ever be designated as historic. In many cases, it doesn't even mean that they're still standing. But we compiled all of our historic information, and that's what we want to put into the CRID. The problem is that the consultant is based in Nebraska, which is amazing that the state of California, home of Silicon Valley, goes out to Nebraska to get a firm to do this kind of database. But they need to get access into our server system, and so that's where we stand today, working with our IS department to give them access, which is not an easy or in many cases a desirable thing to give a foreign entity access. So we're kind of working on that, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I can't say this again for another year, we have to have CRID done this year. So once it's done, though, it's a great resource because it's already up on our website, but we'll make a much bigger deal of it, both on the website. We'll try to get some press attention. We'll try to regularly remind people that this information is accessible. And what it's going to tell people is whether a building or property has been designated, whether it's been surveyed and looks like it's eligible for designation, but hasn't, achieved that status yet, or if it's been identified either by staff, by the commission in some ways, or by the historical societies in town as a building of interest, where we don't know enough about it possibly, but we want to put a little flag on it, so if someone's thinking of buying that property or someone's thinking of altering it or demolishing it, they'll have access to know, okay, well, it's been identified. We don't know exactly what that means right now, but we're going to take the steps to figure out if it's a building that may be worthy of protection in some way. So it's going to be a tremendous system. Right now, we use it at staff level regularly. I'm on it all the time when people call up and say, is my building historic? And that's on our website. If you go to the planning department website, to the historic preservation page, that's what it says, is my building historic? And among some of our other survey information, CRID is in there, so you can look at that and kind of, it's a database where you can search by address or by architectural style. You can search by architect. That's kind of cool, but it's going to be much, much cooler and much better as soon as we get it finalized. So
Yeah,
that's the long answer to your question.
No, that's wonderful, and I'm sorry I wasn't aware that that's out there. And you said there are approximately 2,000?
When we're done, we'll have, and the number's back in my head somewhere,
Right.
I think it's close to 2,000.
Right, I think that's a really valuable.
But I want to make sure everyone understands that that's not 2,000 properties that we will never see demolished or changed.
Right.
We have a lot of those are historic properties that are designated or in historic districts, so we know we have protection for those. The others, we just don't want to slip through the cracks. If someone comes in to try to pull a permit, we want to have the time to take the extra step to evaluate whether or not it's an important property.
And I'm sorry, did you say these were identified through surveys?
Many of them. We have surveys going back for the last 30 years.
Okay.
Surveys have a shelf life of 5 years, so obviously a 30-year-old survey isn't something we're going to, say that's definitely a historic resource under the CEQA definition, but we're going to look at it again to see if it continues to be a property of interest, and if it is, then we would work with the owner of the property or whoever's proposing changes to determine whether it meets the standards under a state environmental law.
I think once this is complete, it would be a great thing to show to the community, maybe even at our Preservation Month. Just an overview so people know it's there as a resource, how to use it, what type of information.
I love the idea of a May kind of deadline for the rollout and the publicity for it. There are too many uncertainties to guarantee it, but I'd love to do that. It would be a great thing for Preservation Month.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I just have one minor on the attendance record.
Uh-oh.
I think
They're not paying close attention to
Okay,
that,
but minor probably doesn't really impact anything. I think we can put a P in May for me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to also concur with the addition of this city building designation. That's one of the items I had added to our goals.
Okay.
Another detail, I don't know if it matters, Jay, but as far as my background, it's interior architecture or interior design, and I don't know if architecture is their general category or if it matters.
I think they're looking for people who have kind of architectural
Just so you know.
training.
Okay.
So I think you made it. I think they have a list, in fact, of the various professional subdisciplines, and because we can't afford to lose another
No.
commissioner.
I just didn't want it to be misstated.
No, I don't think we're overstating it.
Okay.
No.
Any other comments or questions?
Could I go back to old business for a second, or?
Sure, I don't see a problem with that.
Okay. We usually look at the issues that we're addressing, policy issues, and kind of solicit new ideas and things as a standing item. And one of the ones, or at least get an opportunity to talk about where we are in the scheme of things and if there's anything queued up to discuss. And I know we had talked about at some point getting to the status of the Craftsman survey.
Okay.
What's come and gone since the survey was done is kind of a snapshot of how we're doing with using these surveys to take judgment on whether properties are historic or not. So could we reinstate a look at that?
It's my mistake. We've intended to include that as a running item on every agenda, and I am now realizing I completely forgot to do it. So unfortunately, we can't discuss anything
That's okay.
specific right now. It'll definitely be back next month.
Okay.
And what this does is I'll try to start pulling together the information about the Craftsman survey so that we can actually talk about it next month, because I remember back before November, our holiday break.
Right.
We had queued it up.
I think it was queued up
Yeah.
already, so I'll double check that. And
Great,
then-
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, then let's move on to number 9, Planning Division updates. Item A is a briefing on the potential revisions to the Historic Preservation Ordinance.
Okay. I want to start the discussion by saying we have an excellent historic preservation ordinance compared to many cities around the state. But we've been discussing at staff level a possible incentive to kind of increase people's use of the preservation ordinance to really make changes that we can see from the street. And so that kind of discussion about how we can increase, the desirability of preservation for property owners and developers led to an idea that if we're doing that, it would have to be done through an ordinance revision, and this would be a good time for us to kind of just clean up our ordinance and make some fairly modest changes. So when I suggested this, we realized we can't start, the commission itself or staff cannot inaugurate a policy change, like an ordinance change. We have to go to City Council and request that they initiate the process. At the same time, we didn't want the Preservation Commission to be blindsided by us going to City Council. So at this point, we just want to start a very, very general kind of discussion so that the public knows, the Commission knows that we're interested in doing this. We have no idea if we're going to get the initiation from City Council or where it's going to take us. But the idea is that, like I said, the ordinance is quite good. The places where the main issue that at staff level I have, and I know the Commission has shared this in the past, is with our designation criteria. So that would be the meat of the changes that we would be recommending. And what we're basing this on is the state document drafting effective historic preservation ordinances, which is by no means a Bible. This isn't, write your ordinance this way. The state recognizes that every municipality has different needs and different issues and different constituencies, and so we tailor ordinances to meet the needs that we have in the community. The idea of changing our criteria would basically just be to get rid of some of the criteria that many people use when they're nominating their properties to the Glendale Register. For example, that it reflects the heritage of the city, which we have properties that do that, but very few single-family homes built in the 1920s individually reflect the heritage of the city. In aggregate, they do to some degree, but many people are so proud of their properties and their houses that they say, of course this meets the heritage, because it's a beautiful example of Spanish colonial revival. So that's the kind of criterion that we really don't need, because if you pare things down to the way the National Register system works and then the California Register system works, there are only 4 criteria generally. A property is important because it's associations with people, its associations with events, historically important events. It's important because of its architecture, and as you all know, that's the main criterion that we use for designation of properties here. And then there's also a 4th criterion that the site either has or could yield archaeological significance. And it's really easy to forget that archaeology is a big part of historic preservation in many parts of the country, not as big a part in kind of urbanized areas like Glendale. But to be consistent and to acknowledge the potential that who knows what we're going to find in the future, we would definitely want to have a criterion for archaeology. Along with the kind of important to the heritage of Glendale criterion, we might also consider removing that a property is a long-standing visual feature of a neighborhood. Not because we don't like long-standing visual features of neighborhoods, but generally those features have some historic or architectural significance in addition to being a well-recognized feature. What we don't want, and we really haven't had people abusing this criterion, but it's hard for me to imagine a property that would only be designated under that criterion and not meet any of the others. So for that reason, and then also there's a criterion about that a property contains open spaces or natural areas that are important to, the overall natural environment of the city. And again, any natural space that we were to designate would have some significance beyond being a beautiful natural space. It's not really our job to identify, open land and say that's historic. There might be other groups that take on conservation easements or treat open spaces differently, but it's not generally the purview of historic preservation commissions. So that's kind of the primary goal. And then, in addition, we'll work in a possible kind of incentive criterion in which a property could be designated because it's part of a larger project and is being preserved as part of that larger project. And what that would do is allow us to extend the Mills Act to a property that might have some eligibility question marks. When you look at the Good House and the housing project that was built around the Good House, I think it's a good example. I think it works. But in many cases, when you do things like that, the property that you're trying to save may lose its eligibility because its environment has been so dramatically altered. And if we had an incentive criterion, we might be able to work around that potential problem. And the incentive would be that property owners, if this was a condominium or an individually held property, could be given the Mills Act for preservation of the site that might have some eligibility compromises or challenges otherwise. We haven't worked out any details. This is all really, really preliminary. But we've seen a number of situations around the city where something like this could be an incentive and could be of benefit not only to the owner but also to the community. So we wanted to explore it. When we thought about different ways to do that, it seemed the only way was through designation. You can't just give the Mills Act to someone because you like the property. The Mills Act has to go to a designated property. And some properties might be on the cusp of eligibility for designation, or like I said, the work itself might compromise them in some way, but they still have value. So we'll be working this out. In terms of the input from the Commission today, if you have any big picture ideas, I think this would be a great time to share them. But in terms of details, the way we picture this going is we're going to try to organize a council hearing to ask that this be initiated, which gives us the go-ahead to really start working on this and developing a draft of the revisions. We would then share those with the commission, obviously, and have a public meeting where you would discuss them. We'd hear from the public. We'd also share them with the State Preservation Office. As part of our CLG status, they have to review any changes to our ordinance or our element before we actually make them. And if, say, we did something horrible, they could revoke our CLG status, which we don't ever want to have happen. I don't think anything we're proposing is at that level, but that would be the process. And then we would go back to the council once everyone's weighed in with a proposal for changed language for the ordinance. We could also possibly, depending on where we're going with this, nothing that we're considering seems to be controversial, but sometimes you never know. We could also be open to the idea of, having a public meeting of some sort, or perhaps a special commission meeting in the evening where we could get more feedback if we thought there was going to be interest. So, comments, questions? I'm happy to.
So if I understand, we're looking at kind of rolling up we have 7 criteria right now, maybe rolling those up into 4.
Yeah, the fifth might be the incentive criterion. So we'd, even though we're saying we're trying to follow the best practices that the state offers us with the 4 criteria, we have the flexibility to add a 5th if we want. So.
Okay. Well, and no, sorry, I'm thinking. Did somebody else want to go? And I know this is still just very high level. So, but would we be more definitive under each category? Would we define what we mean by?
Well, we would use similar language to what the National Register and the state registers use. And we can't be too definitive because we don't know what we're going to hear. We don't know what people are going to submit. So we want to be broad enough to encompass the range of historic sites that we might look at. But we'll be specific. We want to make sure that people nominating understand that we are looking to see why their property, the same mantra we always use, why is this house different than its beautiful neighboring houses?
Right.
So we want to make sure that that's kind of built into this so that people understand that this isn't just something you apply, you get designated, and you get your Mills Act.
Right.
There's something special going on at the property. So.
I think overall I concur with the rationale to limit the categories. I think, like you said, if it's or reducing the Glendale heritage or contributing to the heritage of the city, obviously one of these other things would probably be standing as well. So I think this would be good and helpful because I think the tendency is people are trying to designate them under too many items and it's too broad currently that this would really limit and I think make it more simple for the public.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other comments or questions?
After we have comments and questions, are we going to go on to something else related to this, or is that this is it? This is the opportunity to say what you want to say?
This is the opportunity for
This
A.
is in a public forum. If you individually have a brainstorm, there's nothing to prevent you from discussing it with staff later.
Okay. I
But
have a couple
it'll
comments
all
then.
come out in the next public hearing. So.
Okay, I concur with with my colleagues and would like to see us do something to help us with the best remaining type in the neighborhood issue, which is always somehow problematic as a criteria. Not that it isn't a valid one, but it creates a lot of discussion. And then also address something related to the issue of the natural setting, and I'm interpreting that as landscaping, man-made, or naturally occurring, however it relates to the property within the context of a historic structure.
Okay.
So, that we're incorporating man-made landscaping into that idea.
Yeah, and we already do, but we could be more clear about that, because usually we don't focus on the landscaping unless we know it was a design landscape that was meant to go with the property. And when we get cases like that, we want the ordinance to allow us to designate it. We also want to be able to designate most cities, the Oak of Peace, may it rest in peace, is still designated. And we don't know. Someone else may have the first orange tree planted in Glendale or something, and, we want to be able to have the ability to designate things like that. So, yeah, we'll definitely have to keep it broad enough for those.
So were you asking what category then would that fall into if we
Well,
eliminate natural setting?
Yeah, I was actually not that specific. I was just saying I don't think it should be tossed away. We have to somehow retain that, I think.
Yeah, and I think the architecture criterion would for the man-designed landscape, it would definitely fit into that as a part of the architecture. And a site that is notable for the seasonal creek that runs through it and the grove of oak trees in the backyard, that can be called out in the designation report as a significant feature of the property. And then if someone came along and said, well, we want to move our garage and we have to take out, I guess they couldn't be oaks, maybe there's another type of tree that's a beautiful contributor to the quality of the site, we could include that in a designation report as part of the overall setting. It wouldn't have to be, a separate criterion because we're not designating the backyard separately. When we designate a property, we do the whole parcel, including everything that's on the parcel. So I think we'd be able to incorporate.
Okay.
What we wouldn't be doing is designating open space on the north face
Right,
of Verdugo
sure.
Mountains or
It's
something.
more of a conservation
Yeah.
issue. The only other comment I had, and this may not be relevant to this level of discussion, but there were a few things that caught my eye here, one of them being the designation of historic businesses, which is not exactly something that you would put into an ordinance, but it's something that we occasionally think about and confuse with historic structures, and if there's any way to address that in our ordinance.
You mean the actual tenant inside a building?
Yeah, because it's mentioned in, the questions you should be asking yourself. And we've asked ourselves questions about businesses in the past. Some of them have gone by the wayside, some of them are still with us, but just an interesting topic that I think is relevant to Glendale.
Yeah, now, you didn't read anything about that in this, did you?
No, other than Section 1.
Right.
Section 1.
Talks about businesses?
Where it
Page
says,
six.
on page 6 of the document, where it says, ask yourself about neighborhoods, districts, are there also historic businesses or industrial resources which need consideration? And I interpreted that at face value.
Which bullet point is that?
We're on the second page of item of Section 1, which is called page 6 on the bottom
Right.
right, and it's at the bullet points at the top, the last bullet point in the set at the top, and the word historic businesses is used there.
I can't imagine that they meant that. I think they mean buildings. I've never heard of a preservation ordinance that can protect a business.
Okay.
It's an incredibly difficult issue, especially
Yes.
when a business has a sign
Agreed.
that is well loved by the community, and a new business moves in. You can't expect the new business to change its name to the old business's name, and the sign, hopefully it goes to Mona or somewhere. We want it. We will still be able to see it, but there's never been an ordinance that protects businesses because there's so much out of control in
Okay.
terms of whether a business is viable. So
The term caught my eye.
yeah, I've read this and it never struck me that way. So
And then the issue of signage, I don't know where we are with that or where that falls in terms of regulation.
it would be part of the, or if a building's designated under the architectural criterion, like with the Seeley's building,
Right.
the Seeley signage was included as part of the designation, as a significant part of the building. So we can capture a lot with less. We don't need a lot of ordinances to capture all the things we hope to protect. So. Okay, so we'll move forward with this to City Council unless.
Okay.
Great.
So just to confirm next steps, City Council give us permission, then it would come back to us for final review. of
Yeah,
what's
we
being-
would draft a proposed, we'd do a strikeout draft, so you could see the old language and the new language side by side. I'd have to find out, I'm not sure. I think we would go to SHPO after everyone's already approved it, but I might give a draft to them earlier to make sure there's no glaring problems that are going to hold us up later, and then we'll go to council, yeah.
Okay. Then with that, we'll go to 9B, consideration of potential Preservation Month activities for May 2012.
Okay, yeah, we had one good idea so far that came up. We talked about this last year. We haven't really moved forward on it, and obviously May is coming up. So I was hoping to hear any ideas that you guys have thought of in the interim period. What we probably won't be able to do is kind of an awards ceremony or the kinds of things we have, kind of long-term goals. We want to reinvigorate kind of the city drawing attention to projects, not just preservation projects, but also design projects that are, of interest and that are successful. So that's kind of, maybe 2013 when the economy picks up and we actually start having more projects coming in. It'll be nice to do that. But ideas, Stephanie just mentioned that when the Bicycle Coalition did the history ride in conjunction with the Historical Society, the Preservation Commission could get involved in something like that or inaugurate something like that, and we could try to build, support and organize that. Do you have any specific thoughts? Or? That's it? One thought I had is try to work with the libraries. We used to have a display case in the City Hall lobby, and it was generally offered to the planning department for Preservation Month, and we would put up a little display. And when they restored the floor in the lobby, the case went away, and I haven't heard that it's being brought back. So we might look for another venue. And I would think that something at the Central Library, if they could give us a week or more to craft a display. We have some materials already in hand. We could certainly make others and pull together something, I think, very affordably, fairly easily, that would get some nice visibility. So that was my big idea.
Do we happen to have a list of activities that have been planned in the past? And then is there some kind of budget that goes with this?
We've never done anything significant in the past. I think in the absence of having the display case in City Hall, we've still been declaring Preservation Month, but we haven't been doing anything to really celebrate that.
Okay.
So I think we need to kind of start fresh and come up with ideas, some of which could become traditions, or we could have one-offs each year.
Didn't we last year, though, have the evening special meeting as part of that Preservation Month?
No, that was at the beginning of the year. That was our
just
year-end
to
wrap-up.
highlight the year. Okay.
Yeah. That's definitely an idea, so.
I mean, I think the display cases obviously are a nice idea to have available, but something that might be a little more interactive to kind of get the community out, or, and I don't know I don't have any great brainstorms at the moment, but, events.
Could we, as a commission, without violating the Brown Act, tag team a walking tour and maybe focus on something like the City of Glendale's historic buildings, designated or otherwise?
Yeah, we could do a civic center,
Civic
downtown
center.
walking tour would be fairly.
Yeah, and I think there are
Smaller.
already some templates available from past tours. Could be a lot of fun and maybe get people involved.
Actually, I think there's a double-decker bus tour coming up for Mona. Maybe
Right.
we could do a bus tour.
Budget is going to be an issue. So we really have to think kind of low,
Limited,
no
of
cost.
course, yeah. Well, that's why I was also...
Or think of sponsorship opportunities of businesses or people in the community who might be interested in sponsoring something. That would be great, where you have a lot of connections out in the world. You had any ideas?
How about education and outreach? Do we do anything? Can we have an event where interested parties can come in and we can maybe invite them to learn more about the process of registering their property?
Yeah, we've done kind of Glendale Register-oriented presentations in conjunction with the Historical Society before. And I don't know if you celebrate May Preservation Month as a group, but
Typically, Preservation Month, we will have events during.
because it's a very good combination when the city pairs with, we have two historical societies working here, and they have memberships who are really interested in this. Obviously, we want to reach beyond the usual suspects and try to draw more people in to learn about preservation, but that would be, it's a good synergy between the groups, so we could look into that.
Or maybe even having pamphlets in libraries about
Yeah.
about the preservation program that we have, or maybe how the process works, or just having a pamphlet in the different libraries.
Yeah, this could be a good opportunity. We are working on revisions to Come Home to Glendale, which is the pamphlet that the neighborhood services team puts together that they distribute to realtors who offer it to new residents of Glendale. And history actually plays. There's a lot of stuff in that pamphlet that ties into what we do. We're working on some revisions to it right now, so we're going to try to make those connections stronger. But we definitely could have, and what we don't have now is a nice, concise, good-looking brochure about the Glendale Register, about the Mills Act, something like that. The city's in the middle of, or coming to the point where we're adopting a new city kind of brand identity. This could be a good time to kind of tie us into that to some degree. But I think doing something like a pamphlet is fairly low budget, and something that we could certainly, put into a lot of places around the city. If every library had one, that's, a million times better than what we do right now. So, the city's also redesigning its website. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we will definitely want to make sure that the preservation page that we have now is a little more graphically interesting and a little more dynamic than what we're working with. So.
And I think
And a lot of this is, we'll go through this and talk about it in-house, about what we can do by May, and then we'll solicit, how much can the commission help, or who do you know who would be interested in something like this, and so you see what's realistic. But we have 9 ideas so far, which is more than when we talked about it last year, so it's good.
Yeah, I had a couple other things. Tour, and then if we had some kind of a standardized templated presentation that covered, what does the commission do, what are the issues that we're working on, what are some of the, kind of like a little update, except instead of calling people in, maybe we as individuals could fan out and speak to different groups in the community during Preservation Month as representatives of the commission, and more or less cover, a similar range of topics, if people are willing to do that. Instead of calling them to us, we go to them.
No, I think there are a lot of groups who are dying for agenda material at their monthly meetings, so we could hopefully get in for May.
Yeah. And then another idea would be, since I don't think there'd be a big budget attached to it, to screen a movie. I don't know how many, other than, I'm not sure, maybe the Historical Society was planning another screening of a couple of the big historic movies, but, okay, we'll cancel that one then. So, that was it for me.
one more idea, and I think this would be, we briefly discussed it earlier, but, and this would be a long-term project with a bigger budget, but maybe a coffee table book, and this could be something that we could maybe do in conjunction with the Historic Society about the first 100 properties that were designated.
We're getting close. We won't be there by May, but May 2013, likely,
That's why,
possible.
long-term.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great. But books, I think doing something for 100 is interesting, because usually as soon as you print one of those books, it's out of date. But if we have a number that we're celebrating, then it's never out of date. So, okay, so what we'll do is talk about these among staff and see what resources we have, time commitment. if each of you, especially for the ideas that you've generated, if you have any idea, like how much can you help with something like this, it would be great in the next few weeks to kind of just come up with a list of the things that we want to do and start working toward it, so that May, which will come sooner than we know, we'll have at least, all I think we should shoot for is one event, and then we're 100% better than we were last year. But anything we do is going to be good. So if we can get a couple of things going, that's going to be fantastic.
Great. Okay, moving on to 9C, an update on the pending historic district applications.
Okay, as I said, we hopefully when we submit our next CLG report, we will be reporting that 3 districts have moved through the process. We still don't know if we're going to get all the community support that we need. We don't know that City Council is going to vote for these, but we're hopeful that they'll move through smoothly. As far as the update goes, Ross Moines is in its second petition signature gathering phase. The petition is due on April 24th, did I say?
23rd.
23rd, thank you. Due on April.
We'll take the 24th.
You don't have it. It's due on April 23rd. That's the 6-month initial signature gathering period. If for whatever reason you need more time, there's another 6-month period that the Commission can grant if the applicants ask for that. But at this point, I think we're moving toward this within the 6-month period that we should have the submission of the signatures. What that will mean is that petition is asking City Council to designate the Ross Moines Historic District. It's not done at that point. We need the owners of over 50% of the properties to sign this. And as you know, Council has asked to make that number closer to 70 or higher so that we know there's strong support in the neighborhood. What will happen when those petitions come in is once we verify the signatures, we schedule a Historic Preservation Commission hearing. You will vote on whether you have heard from the people and want this to move forward to City Council. We then go to the Planning Commission for the same type of discussion, and then we go to City Council for the final vote. So that is the closest to completion at this point. North Cumberland Heights, I'm happy to say that we have almost completely, within minutes, finished the North Cumberland Heights Historic Resource Survey update. So that means we are free to schedule the next commission hearing to review the survey and also to hold a public hearing or public meeting before that date so that the homeowners and residents of that area will have a chance to look at the survey document, the survey form that's individually, done for each of their houses, and get back to us with any feedback that they have, and then for the commission to look at this. So I'm tentatively scheduling a public meeting for March 14th, but we haven't nailed down the venue, so that's tentative at this point, and then March 26th for Historic Preservation Commission. And this will be the hearing where you then authorize the proponents of the district to do their first petition. If you believe the survey is complete, then they can, to do their second petition to go out into the neighborhood asking if people want the district. And then Brockmont Park, we had a volunteer preservation consultant working on the report and survey for that, and her schedule has gotten to be far too complicated for her to complete the work that she graciously offered to do in the first place. But she's done a lot, and so what we've done is now that North Cumberland Heights is completed, staff is going to take on some of the work to finish that survey. She meets the Secretary of the Interior standards as a preservation consultant to prepare this kind of survey. So what we're going to do is take it to the point where we give it back to her so that she can read through, verify, and use her professional assessment that this meets the standards. What this means is it's not like when we just did the update where we asked the state office to weigh in on it. This will be kind of a done deal when she's okay with it. And then we'll, again, send that out to all of the residents in the area and start the process over again through the HPC hearing and then the final petition. So that is our update. We haven't heard from any new districts to date. We still have a couple percolating that we haven't taken off our list of, potential projects that are going to come our way. But nothing has moved forward to the point where we have an application. So if anyone is in the community interested in this and is listening, we're closing out 3, so we're soon to be ready to take on some more.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Right.
Do we have any individual designations in the pipeline?
Yeah, we have 2 scheduled for next month's hearing, and I still haven't seen the 2 that I mentioned earlier. I don't know that we'll put 4 on the same hearing, so in the next couple of months we should have some Glendale Register nominations. Definitely 2 for next month.
Thank you.
And to your point of any districts out there that are percolating or people who are thinking of or are saying to themselves, we know we have a very interesting neighborhood here, but we just are so busy we can't get to it. There are resources for hire out there, and I have no connection to any of them, but they are available for those who feel that they want to get the work done but just don't have the internal resources to prepare the documentation. And I know that Jay Platt can provide you with some recommendations there if you do need assistance to help you with the work that you would like to do if you weren't so busy. So that's just some maybe words of encouragement for people who would like to do it but can't find the time to do all the work that's necessary.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, then we'll move to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Adjourned?
I'll second.